The dusty Montana sun hung low on the horizon, painting the wide-open sky with streaks of gold and amber, when the stagecoach rattled its way down the winding road that led to the McAllister Ranch. Inside the carriage sat a young woman, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear, hope, and uncertainty. Her name was Clara, a mail-order bride from the East, who had left behind everything she knew to come west in search of a new beginning. Her family had fallen on hard times after her father's death, and the only prospects that remained for her in Boston were endless days of sewing in a cramped boarding house or marrying a man twice her age who cared more about her dowry than her dreams. When she saw the advertisement for a rancher seeking a wife, promising stability, companionship, and a chance to build a family in the open country, she gathered her courage, packed her modest belongings, and boarded the train that would carry her into an unknown life. She had memorized the name of the man who was to be her husband, Thomas Whitaker, a respected rancher with a sprawling property and a reputation for kindness. She repeated his name silently as the wheels clattered against the wooden tracks, reminding herself that she was stepping into destiny. What she did not know was that the coach driver, distracted and weary, had been given the wrong directions, and the path she was traveling would not take her to the Whitaker Ranch but instead to the McAllister Ranch, where a widowed rancher named John lived with his 8-year-old daughter, Emily. John McAllister had not ridden for a bride, nor had he expected one, but his life had been marked by sorrow since the passing of his beloved wife 3 years ago. He had thrown himself into endless work, tending cattle, fixing fences, and keeping the ranch afloat, all the while trying to raise Emily with as much love as his weary, calloused heart could muster. Yet no matter how hard he worked, nothing could fill the aching absence that lingered in their home. Emily, bright-eyed and tender-hearted, missed the soft presence of a mother and had begun whispering prayers at night, asking God to send someone who could bring warmth and laughter back into their lives. And so, when the stagecoach rolled to a halt in front of the McAllister Ranch house, dust swirling in the air, and Clara stepped down in her travel-worn dress clutching her small carpet-bag, destiny took a strange and unexpected turn. Clara looked up at the ranch house with trembling hands, rehearsing the words she might say when she met her intended husband, unaware that this was not Thomas Whitaker's property at all. John, hearing the wheels outside, stepped out onto the porch, his weathered face set in a mask of curiosity and mild suspicion. He had not been expecting visitors, much less a finely dressed young woman with eyes that spoke of both fear and determination. For a moment, the two stared at one another. Until Emily rushed out from behind her father's legs, her golden hair catching the fading sunlight. She looked at Clara with a wonder only a child could hold and whispered in a soft but certain voice, "Daddy. God finally sent her to us." The words hung in the air like a sacred prophecy, startling John and bringing sudden tears to Clara's eyes. She knelt instinctively, setting down her bag, and met Emily's gaze. Something in that little girl's innocent certainty pierced through all of Clara's fears. Though she had never met this child before, it felt as if her soul recognized her, as if some invisible thread tied them together across the years of longing and loss. John cleared his throat, suddenly uncomfortable, and demanded an explanation. "Ma'am, who are you, and what brings you here?" Clara rose, fumbling for words, and explained that she had been sent as a mail-order bride, that she had come expecting to meet her husband-to-be, Thomas Whitaker. At the mention of the name, John's brow furrowed, and realization dawned that the driver must have brought her to the wrong ranch. He tried to explain, but Emily clung to Clara's hand with surprising strength, refusing to let go. "Please, Daddy," she whispered again, "don't send her away. God sent her here for us." John's heart, long hardened by grief and solitude, wavered as he looked between his daughter's pleading eyes and the young woman standing uncertainly before him. Clara felt the sting of humiliation rising in her chest. Was she to be discarded before she had even met her intended husband? Yet there was something in Emily's touch, in her unwavering belief, that made Clara's spirit steady. She lifted her chin, blinking back tears, and said softly, "Perhaps I was brought here by mistake, but perhaps it wasn't a mistake at all." And with those words, the course of all their lives began to change. The morning after Clara's unexpected arrival at the McAllister Ranch dawned with a quiet beauty, the kind that only wide skies and endless fields could hold. Clara awoke to the crow of a distant rooster, the smell of fresh hay drifting through the window, and the faint sound of Emily humming to herself outside. For a moment, Clara lay still, trying to recall where she was and why her heart was filled with such a mixture of fear and peace. Then the memory came: this was not Thomas Whitaker's ranch, not the place she had been promised, but John McAllister's home. By all logic, she should have insisted on leaving immediately, demanded to be taken to her rightful destination, and completed the contract that had brought her west. Yet something deep inside told her she had arrived exactly where she was meant to be. She rose from the small guest bed, smoothed her dress, and tied her hair back before stepping into the yard where Emily was scattering grain for the chickens. The little girl turned, her eyes lighting up as though she had been waiting all her life for Clara to step out that door. "You came," Emily said, as though she had doubted the miracle would remain through the night. "Daddy said you might leave, but I prayed you wouldn't." Clara knelt, brushing a strand of golden hair from Emily's cheek. "I'm still here," she whispered, feeling her heart swell at the child's innocent faith. Behind them, John appeared from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, his expression guarded. He was not a man who wore his heart openly, yet Clara could sense the battle within him. He had not asked for her, did not want to be indebted to anyone, and yet he could not deny the spark of life her presence seemed to bring to his daughter. That day, Clara offered to help with the chores, eager to prove she was not a burden. She carried water from the well, gathered eggs, and even learned to guide the skittish mare Emily often fed sugar cubes to. John watched quietly, surprised at how quickly she adapted. At first, he wanted to insist she go on to the Whitaker ranch, to correct the mistake before matters became complicated, but every time he looked at Emily's radiant smile as she clung to Clara's hand, his resolve weakened. At night, when the stars shimmered like diamonds above the dark plains, John found himself staring into the fire, remembering his late wife, Mary. He had loved her with all his soul, and losing her had nearly broken him. For years he had told himself no one could ever take her place, and perhaps that was true. Yet Clara did not come to replace Mary, she came bringing her own light, her own quiet strength, and somehow it filled the empty spaces left behind. Days turned into weeks, and Clara became part of the rhythm of the ranch. She baked bread in the mornings, stitched Emily's dresses by lantern light, and rode alongside John when the cattle needed tending. Neighbors began to notice the change. The once solemn rancher now carried a trace of warmth in his eyes, and his daughter laughed more than she had in years. Rumors spread, and eventually word reached Thomas Whitaker that the bride he had sent for never arrived at his ranch. He came riding one afternoon, his temper sharp and his pride wounded. Clara froze when she saw him, recognizing the man she was supposed to marry. John stepped protectively in front of her, his jaw set like stone. "She came here by mistake," Thomas accused, his voice bitter. "You had no right to keep her." Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. "It wasn't his doing. I chose to stay. And I will not go with you, Thomas. Whatever contract was written, it cannot bind my heart." Thomas sneered, but John's unyielding presence left no room for argument. Eventually, Thomas turned his horse and rode away, his pride more wounded than his heart. The silence that followed was thick, but Emily broke it by throwing her arms around Clara's waist. "See, Daddy? I told you, God sent her for us." For the first time in years, John felt tears prick his eyes, not from sorrow but from the dawning realization that perhaps his daughter was right. Perhaps Clara's arrival was no mistake at all but an answer to prayers he had long buried. That night, as the three of them sat together by the fire, John finally let the walls around his heart begin to fall. He thanked Clara for her courage, for choosing to stay despite the misunderstanding, and for bringing life back into a home that had been too quiet for too long. Clara, her hand resting gently over Emily's, whispered that she had prayed too, that God might lead her where she truly belonged. And in that moment, under the glow of the firelight, John understood what destiny had done. A bride had been sent to the wrong ranch, yes, but in truth she had been sent exactly where she was needed. The chapter of grief in his life was not erased but transformed into something new, something full of hope, faith, and unexpected love. And as Emily drifted to sleep on Clara's lap, John knew his daughter's words would forever echo in his soul: God finally sent you to us.